I'm not fit enough. I'm not fast enough. I didn't eat well enough. I didn't sleep well enough. I'm overstressed. But if you really track, generally that has to do with what's happening with these hormones. It doesn't have to do with your fitness. It has to do with your physiology.
Welcome to the Run Lift Mom podcast, where we're talking about running, lifting, and momming, not necessarily in that order. Today, we are going to be in all three because I've got Dr. Stacy Sims, female physiology and nutrition expert. If you don't know Dr. Sims from her TEDx talk, Women Are Not Small Men, maybe you know her from her books, Roar or the cookbook, Eat, Race, Win. Nonetheless, she is a wealth of information. I am so excited to talk to her, and this is probably the biggest girl power episode I've ever had. Dr. Sims's vision is a world of healthy women who understand their bodies, know how to work with their unique physiology, and know that their periods are ergogenic aids that can help performance. You guys, she wants us to understand our body. She wants to create positivity within our gender. This is an empowering episode if I've ever had one. Without further ado, Dr. Stacy Sims. All right, welcome Dr. Stacy Sims to the Run Lift Mom podcast. Dr. Sims, you have been doing research in physiology, nutrition, human movement, specific to women. That's the real key part. Can you tell us the focus of your studies and some of the research that you're out there presenting?
Yeah. So, one, first, thank you for having me. And two, the research has been going on for, I don't know how many ever years. And I'm really glad to see that it's finally being out there in the mainstream. But what we know is almost all the methods and protocols for training and nutrition is based on male data. So you usually have 18 to 22-year-old college-age men who will volunteer for studies. And then all those results are generalized to women. And throughout my academic and sporting career, I've questioned that and said, well, this doesn't really apply to me because I'm not a guy, or it doesn't apply to some of my teammates or colleagues that are also doing some of the research because we have menstrual cycles, or we're perimenopausal, or some women are postmenopausal. So when we start really trying to figure out how to make exercise and nutrition work for us, we have to look beyond the generalizations that are out there and really start looking at some of the newer research to see how our physiology reacts to training, stress, and nutrition. It's pretty much in a nutshell.
And, I shouldn't just say research because you've got some really solid application as well. But I mean, what I hear you saying is a lot of these general templates or the blanket training advice that we receive as women, it has been in the past, rooted in science that maybe was men. And so what you're saying is that the newer stuff shows us there are differences for women.
Exactly.
Awesome. Do you mind talking to us about those differences? I mean, obviously, estrogen.
Yeah, estrogen. So we know that the primary female sex hormones are estrogen and progesterone. And a lot of us think of it as, estrogen and progesterone, somehow in the back of our head of seventh grade health, we understand it has something to do with the menstrual cycle and reproduction, which it does. But for the most part, you have to understand that estrogen and progesterone affect every cell of the body. So what I mean by that is, as we have a menstrual cycle and estrogen and progesterone are low for about the first 14 days, where day 1 is the first day of bleeding and day 14 is ovulation, where you have an estrogen surge. After ovulation, estrogen kind of dips, and then estrogen and progesterone both come up and start to peak about 4 days before your period starts again. So all these different fluctuations of estrogen and progesterone, they affect every system of the body. So it affects the way our body fuels exercise. It affects the way our moods change because that affects different neurotransmitters in our brain. It affects the way our body recovers and repairs. It affects the way we handle stress. It also affects the way we think about how fitness is going for us because, you talk to women and there's so many times when they're training and they're like, what's wrong with me? I don't feel fit. I felt really great 2 days ago. What have I done? I'm not fit enough. I'm not fast enough. I didn't eat well enough. I didn't sleep well enough. I'm overstressed. But if you really track, generally that has to do with what's happening with these hormones. It doesn't have to do with your fitness. It has to do with your physiology.
Oh, it's so fascinating. So I'm sure, people either take this knowledge and apply it in one of two ways, right? One, maybe for performance. Maybe they're like me and they're a marathon runner and they're looking at their calendar, right? As it relates to these cycles. But then also the other side of the coin is health and longevity, right? Like quality of life. Do you mind just speaking to both of those?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So when we think about the short term and we're thinking about all the different performance metrics we have throughout our life, it can be you're trying to do your first 5K and do it well, all the way up through marathon and ultra running. If we're tracking our menstrual cycle and we see how it might get longer or shorter, and we also are tracking across our training, so we can see patterns over the course of 2 or 3 menstrual cycles that will allow us to see what days we feel flat and tired and other days we feel fantastic, then we can tailor our training into those days, which gives us more of an ergogenic aid because we don't get fitter while we are training. We get fitter from the stress that we can put in during the training session and then overcoming it in the recovery. So if we are trying to hit high intensities at a point where we're really tired, you're missing a little bit of that ability to hit it high and get that training stress and adaptation. So when we look at it from a performance metric, knowing where our menstrual cycle is and how we respond, again, can really dial it in those key sessions to allow us to get to where we want to be and achieve our performance potential. When we think outside of that performance scope and we think the long term of health and longevity, most of us want to live to be old and have a really good quality of life, which means that we're self-functioning. We can carry our groceries. We can walk up the stairs, even when we're 90. So we need to have good bones. We need to have good muscle. We have to have good joints. So if we think about how we are approaching exercise and nutrition at our earlier stages of life, and we put in resistance training, and we put in good quality fruit and veg and whole grains into our diet to feed our gut microbiome, then we're feeding forward to that longevity. We're improving our bone mineral density. We're improving the integrity of our muscles, of our joints. We're improving our posture. We're keeping our body composition in check. We're improving the interaction between the hormones and the code transport mechanisms that allow us to have good moods and allow us to sleep well. So when you're putting all of these into a framework with the eye to living to be 90, as well as the short-term scope of running your marathon well, it all comes down to how do I take care of my body as a female athlete? Remember, I always say you're an athlete if you exercise on purpose. Having that ability to track your menstrual cycle is one of the best ways of tailoring it all in. One, we can then tailor in our training. And like I said earlier, you can hit it hard when your body's like, yes, let's go hard, and back it down when our body's like, yeah, maybe not so much. But it also is the key checkpoint to say, yeah, I'm healthy. I have a menstrual cycle. Having regular periods, that means that I am responding well and adapting to the stress that's in my life, including training stress. If we lose our menstrual cycle or it starts to become shorter or longer, it's the first red flag to say, hey, wait a second, something's going on with my endocrine system. Something's going on with my hormones. And you have a chance to step back and see, how do I pull back? Where do I take away some of that stress so that I become healthy again, and then I can put some more stress on top?
And from a performance lens, I mean, you mentioned earlier, it's in that recovery, right, that we're making these performance gains. So what I hear you saying is, if you're not getting a period, your body is not responding well to that training. That's a huge red flag.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's the prevailing myth that you lose your period, then you're training hard enough and you're getting fit. But we know it's the opposite. You lose your period, then your body is in a very stressed state. and it cannot adapt well. And you're just going to put yourself into a hole and lean towards what we call relative energy deficiency in sport. And this is where we have bone stress reactions and bone fractures, lots of gastrointestinal distress and other gut issues. We can have high blood lipids or blood fats, high cholesterol, even though we're training, poor sleep, poor mood, depression, anxiety, and it goes on and on. And all these little signs and symptoms come after that menstrual cycle dysfunction and losing your period.
This is so very helpful. Now, of course, I'm gonna point to your course, Dr. Sims. Listener, if you want to click details or swipe up, it's going to depend on the player you're in. Dr. Sims has an entire course about this. Let me though, step back and get even more big picture. Do you recommend, Dr. Sims, if a woman has a day planner or an app in her phone, that kind of thing? What's your step one for tracking this?
Whatever works for you. If you have a day planner, then you can put a little star on the first day of your period so that you know when it starts and you can count forward or backwards to see how long your cycle is. If you want to be a little bit more tech savvy, you can put it into a training log so that you know where you are and you can look at your training versus the day of your menstrual cycle and start to see patterning. Or you can use some of the higher tech apps that are out there, like Wild AI, which is one that I consult with. And I do it on purpose because it's the only one out there that uses artificial intelligence to learn you and your body. So the more data you put into it, the more the app learns your cycle, learns where your flat days are, where your really good bulletproof days are. So it can feed you individual information of how to adjust your training, how to adjust your sleep, how to adjust your nutrition to really garner the benefits of these physiological changes that happen during your menstrual cycle.
That is fantastic. And listener, I'm going to put the link to that in the show notes as well, because we can't manage what we can't measure. So the data here is a really good thing. Dr. Sims, I am the mother of a daughter, and I think about, should my daughter decide she likes sports at some point, it is the running joke that I am an ultra marathoner and she despises even going on a walk, whatever. Let's say Charlotte,
I can relate.
Right? I'll expose her all day long, but that's you can lead a horse at this point.
Right.
As Charlotte gets older and is involved in sports, what you're saying is a lot different than what I was hearing growing up. I'm knocking on 40 right now. How can we create awareness just that there are differences? And again, I'm talking more in a health and longevity lens. I'm not talking about I want to do really well on my next half marathon. I'm talking about creating another generation of healthy, strong women that are aware of how their body works. What are some steps here?
I know I face the same thing. Like my daughter's 8, she'll be 9 in a couple of weeks. And I think she's unique because she hears me all the time talking about this. And some of her friends are becoming a little bit more aware. But on the whole, this is something that so many coaches and parents struggle with. It's having that conversation and making girls aware of what's happening, what puberty is, what a menstrual cycle is. And it's just normalizing that conversation. And sort of the way that I've normalized it in our house is like, if I'm going to the grocery store and I have to buy tampons, then my daughter's with me, then I talk about, I have to get these because my menstrual cycle is coming. And it's just part of that everyday kind of conversation. The more we put it in that taboo box and we don't acknowledge it, or they hear about it from somewhere else, the harder it is to have that conversation as they actually get into it. So it's about normalizing the conversation in your own house. And it could be just between you and your daughter. It doesn't have to be between both parents and the kids, but just having that normalcy around it and just say, boys and girls are different. We see this on the playground. And as you get older, like boys will become fitter and faster temporarily. And you might get to this point where you start to put on a little bit of weight and feel uncomfortable and you'll get your period. But this is just a temporary thing. It's just something to acknowledge that every woman goes through. It's not something to hide from. It's not a disease. It's none of that. It's just what happens as we get older and our bodies respond to these changes. And then it starts to develop and you become fit and fast as you get through it. So it isn't just a sit down one-time conversation. It's having small pockets of conversation throughout their life so that they are aware of these things. And it just is a normal conversation.
Regular dialogue. It's such an exciting time to be a mother. And listener, I hope that you feel that too. With this type of research emerging, with applications like Stacy, you're speaking all the time. I'm going to link to your TED talk below as well. You've got the course. There's a dialogue happening in the culture as well. And it's a cool time to be the mother of the next generation.
Yeah, I'm excited because I do not think that women have achieved their performance potential, not just in sport, but just in daily life, like in grassroots sports, kicking the ball around the field, because things have been put in that taboo box for so long, and people are afraid to talk about things that are just normal. And oftentimes I turn to a room full of male coaches. I'm like, none of you would be here if a menstrual cycle didn't exist. And they're like, wait. And I was like, yeah, it's reproduction. And if it didn't happen and we didn't acknowledge it, no one in this room would be here. And so it's kind of that, oh, yeah, you're right. And it's another way of normalizing the conversation.
I love that you're saying this. There are two ways to look at what we've talked about today, right? The fact that we should be training differently. You can look at it and say, oh no, I've been lied to. I had bad data. There was bad data to go on when my coach in high school was creating that training calendar. But then the other way to look at it, flip it, like you're saying, Dr. Sims, we haven't even scratched the surface. We have not reached our potential as a gender. And that's exciting and it's promising.
Exactly. So yeah, we'll watch the space. Like there are different countries that are implementing sex-specific training protocols within the next 4-year Olympic cycle. So who knows what we'll see when we have the next Rio Olympics, not this July, but in another 4 years. So yeah, it is exciting. And I'm sorry that it's taken 20 some years to get to this point, but I'm glad it finally has.
Well, it's really neat to be speaking with a thought leader and a change agent in this space. Listener, I'm going to put Dr. Sims's information. Again, you're either going to click details or swipe up, going to depend on the player that you're in. But Dr. Sims, do you mind telling folks how they can find you and just some of your favorite resources for women?
Yeah, so social media and the website are both Dr. Stacy Sims. So you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and then, of course, the web. When we talk about resources, because I am also an academic, I tend to look at some of the other researchers that are doing similar work. So I look at what a lot of Catherine Ackerman's group is doing at a Boston's Children's Hospital. So she is an academic, but also an applied physician. So she works a lot with female athletes as well as women who are trying to get fit and encountering lots of hormonal issues. I look at some of the publications that are coming out that are pushing this agenda. So, I mean, you're looking at things like Training Peaks has more information about this. Some of the, like the International Society of Sport Nutrition is having some more position stands that are coming out to help women. So, yeah, when we're talking about specific resources, it's kind of looking not so much in the weeds because it's not in there anymore. It's just floating at the surface.
And that is wonderful news for everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sims, for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great to have a conversation.
It's time for the Alouette product of the week, and this week it is the City Detox Environmental Defense Powder Cleanser. Yeah, you heard me right. This is a powder cleanser. So you guys, you're just going to sprinkle this into your hand. You can mix it with water. The amount of water you use is going to depend on the consistency that you want. You can also mix it in with a foam or a gel-based cleanser. What's going to happen here is it's going to cleanse away pollutants, makeup, and skin impurities. It's an enzyme cleanser and it is detoxifying. It's fantastic. If you wash your face in the morning and the evening, if you can only pick one, I recommend the evening for your City Detox. Detox. It's great to travel with because, it's powder. So throw it in your purse, your mommy backpack, or your gym bag. That is the City Detox Environmental Defense Powder Cleanser. Thank you so much for listening to the Run Lift Mom podcast. I want to let you know that you can swipe up in the podcast player that you're in to see the show notes. That's going to take you to my website and you're going to get a deep dive on today's show. Cool, huh? You can think of it as a blog post that complements what was covered today with all of the links and resources discussed. Don't forget to check out the podcast partners as well with some really great offers for you. And until I get into your earpiece again, remember, for while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. That's from 1 Timothy 4:8, and this has been the Run Lift Mom podcast.